When my mother-in-law brought a DNA test to my baby shower, she wanted to prove I was a cheater. But 2 weeks later, she was standing at my door, pale, shaking, without makeup, begging me not to open the envelope. Because inside was not the truth about my baby. Inside was proof that her son had spent his whole life calling the wrong man dad. Subscribe to the channel and like this video if you enjoy stories where the truth arrives not when people expect it, but when nobody can run from it anymore. My name is Emily Carter. I was 34 years old, living in a quiet suburb outside Columbus, Ohio, and 8 months pregnant with my first child. Back then, I thought the hardest day of my life would be giving birth. I could barely sleep, my feet were swollen, and I cried over baby shampoo commercials like they were tragic movies. My husband, Ryan, kept telling me everything would be fine. He touched my stomach, smiled softly, and acted like he was ready to become the best father in the world. But during those last months, something in his voice had changed. He said the right things, but his mind always seemed somewhere else. I blamed it on stress. Ryan had been working late almost every night. He checked his phone constantly and said he was worried about money. We had a mortgage, medical bills, and a nursery full of things that somehow cost more than our furniture. So I believed him. Because sometimes love begins exactly where the first hard question should have been asked. My baby shower was planned by my mother. She drove in from Cleveland that morning with a lemon cake, soft blue decorations, and tiny napkins for the baby. My father kept fixing balloons near the fireplace, even though they were already perfect. He was nervous because he hated family gatherings where everyone had to pretend they were happy to be in the same room. And that day required a lot of pretending, especially after Linda arrived. Linda was Ryan's mother. She came almost 40 minutes late, but walked in like everyone had been waiting for her. She wore a cream-colored suit, pearl earrings, and shoes that clicked against the floor like a warning. She kissed Ryan on the cheek, then touched my stomach with 2 fingers, like she was inspecting something she had not approved. She made a sweet comment about how large I looked for 8 months. A few guests laughed awkwardly. I smiled too, because I had learned how to swallow Linda's insults without making a sound. She never yelled. She never caused loud scenes. She simply knew how to say things that left me feeling small, cheap, or unwanted. When Ryan and I got engaged, she implied I had gotten used to his salary too quickly. When we bought our house, she wondered whether my parents had helped at all. When I got pregnant, she acted like the baby was a strategy, not a child. I stayed quiet every time. Ryan stayed quiet too. That silence should have warned me long before the test ever appeared. Linda sat beside her daughter, Madison, who barely put her phone down. Madison filmed the cake, the gifts, my swollen ankles, and every little thing her mother said. I noticed the camera stayed on me too long sometimes. But I told myself I was being sensitive. For about an hour, the party stayed normal. We opened gifts, laughed over tiny socks, and guessed who the baby might look like. My mother thought he would have my nose. Linda quickly reminded everyone that Ryan's family had strong genes. Ryan stood near the window with a plastic plate in his hand. He barely ate. He barely spoke. He kept looking at his mother. At one point, Linda gave him a tiny nod. He looked down immediately. That was when I felt something cold move through me. Not a kick from the baby. Not exhaustion. Something sharper. It felt like a trap had already been set in the room, and I just had not seen the rope yet. Then Linda stood and tapped her spoon against her glass. Everyone went quiet, expecting a sweet toast. My aunt even reached for a napkin, ready to cry. I rested my hand on my stomach and tried to breathe. Linda smiled directly at me. She announced that she had brought a small gift. A gift for the truth. At first, someone laughed, because it sounded dramatic. Then Linda reached into her purse and pulled out a white box. I saw the label before she lifted it for everyone to see. A home DNA test. The room went so silent I could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. My mother froze with a cup in her hand. My father slowly straightened beside the fireplace. Madison lifted her phone higher, as if this was the exact moment she had been waiting for. Linda held the box like it was some kind of family treasure. Then she suggested that Ryan deserved to know the truth, because women like me always had something to hide. I looked at my husband. He did not defend me. He did not stop her. He did not even step forward. He only squeezed his plastic plate until the edge cracked. And that was when I understood the most painful part. Linda had not come with a suspicion. She had come with a plan. I slowly took the box from her hand and placed it on the table beside the cake. My voice was shaking somewhere deep inside me, but when I spoke, it came out calm and almost unfamiliar. I agreed to the test. Linda's smile turned victorious. But then I looked straight into her eyes and added my condition. The baby would not be the only one tested. Ryan would take the test too. And so would his father. Linda's smile disappeared instantly. Madison lowered her phone. And Ryan's face went so pale that I finally understood one thing clearly. The DNA test had never been about my baby. The room did not explode after I named my condition. That made it worse. Nobody moved. Nobody laughed. Nobody reached for another slice of cake or pretended the moment could be saved. The baby shower stayed frozen around me, with blue balloons swaying near the ceiling and the DNA test sitting beside the lemon cake like a loaded gun. Linda's face changed first. Not much. Just enough. Her mouth tightened. Her eyes moved from me to Ryan, then toward the hallway, where her husband, Frank, had been standing with a soda in his hand. Frank was Ryan's father. Or at least, that was what everyone in that room had believed for 36 years. Frank had always been quiet around me. Not rude. Not warm either. He was the kind of man who watched everything and said very little. At family dinners, Linda spoke for both of them. Frank paid the bill, carried the leftovers, and disappeared into the garage before dessert. That day, he looked confused. Ryan looked terrified. And Linda looked exposed. That was the first crack. I did not know what it meant yet, but I felt it. Something had shifted under the floor of that room. Linda had come to humiliate me in front of both families. She had expected tears, denial, maybe a fight. She had expected Ryan to stand behind her, silent and useful. She had not expected me to turn the test around. My mother reached for my hand, but I pulled away gently. I loved her, but I could not be comforted yet. Comfort would have made me fall apart, and I needed to stay standing. My father stared at Ryan with a look I had never seen before. Not anger exactly. Something colder. Disappointment sharpened by restraint. Madison still held her phone, but the screen had lowered to her waist. For once, she was not recording. That scared me more than the camera had. It meant she understood this was no longer entertainment. Ryan finally stepped toward me. Not close enough to protect me. Only close enough to stop me. I saw panic in his eyes, and it cut deeper than his silence. Because panic meant he knew there was a reason Linda reacted that way. It meant this was not just about me, not really. There was another story under our marriage, and somehow I had walked into the middle of it while carrying his child. The party ended without anyone announcing it. People left in small, awkward waves. My aunt hugged me too carefully. A neighbor pretended she had an appointment. One of Ryan's cousins took 2 gift bags by mistake and brought them back 10 minutes later without looking me in the eye. The whole house emptied slowly, like air leaving a tire. By sunset, only my parents, Ryan, Linda, Frank, and Madison remained. The decorations looked cruel after that. The blue streamers drooped over the mantel. The cake had a clean slice missing, but nobody had eaten more than 2 bites. The unopened baby gifts sat in a pile near the couch, bright and innocent, as if they belonged to another woman's life. I cleaned the plates because my hands needed something to do. Ryan followed me into the kitchen. He stood near the sink while I scraped frosting into the trash. His face was gray. He looked like a man waiting for a verdict, but I was not ready to become his judge. Not yet. I wanted him to explain without words. I wanted his body to move toward me with certainty. I wanted proof that he had been shocked, not involved. Instead, he watched the DNA test box through the doorway. That told me enough for one night. Linda tried to regain control before she left. She returned to her polished voice, her careful posture, her mother-of-the-groom authority. She acted as if the whole thing had gone too far because of my emotional state. She blamed pregnancy hormones without saying the phrase directly. She made herself sound worried, almost noble. But her hands betrayed her. They shook when she lifted her purse. Frank noticed. I saw the moment he noticed. His eyes dropped to her fingers, then rose slowly to her face. For the first time since I had known him, he looked at his wife like she was a stranger standing in his living room. That look stayed with me all night. After everyone left, Ryan and I sat on opposite ends of the couch. The DNA test remained on the coffee table between us. Neither of us touched it. The baby moved under my ribs, strong and restless. That tiny movement nearly broke me. Because my son had done nothing wrong. He had not asked to enter a family built on secrets. He had not asked to become evidence before he even had a name. I went upstairs alone. Ryan did not follow. That was the second crack. The next morning, I called the testing company and ordered 3 separate kits. One for the baby after birth. One for Ryan and Frank. And one extra, because something inside me said this would not stay simple. The kits arrived 4 days later. Linda called Ryan 6 times that afternoon. He did not answer in front of me. But later that night, I found him sitting in the nursery, holding the unopened box in his lap. The room was dark except for the little moon lamp on the dresser. His shoulders were shaking, but he made no sound. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Then I remembered him standing silent while his mother accused me, and sympathy turned into something harder. I realized then that the test was not the real danger. The real danger was how many people already knew enough to be afraid. The testing kits changed the air in our house. Before they arrived, the fight still felt unreal. Ugly, yes. Cruel, yes. But unreal in the way family drama sometimes feels after guests leave and the dishes are washed. I kept thinking I would wake up and find the blue decorations still folded in the closet. But the kits made it physical. 3 small boxes sat on our kitchen counter. Clean. White. Harmless looking. Each one carried more weight than the mortgage papers, the hospital bills, or the baby crib Ryan had assembled with shaking hands. Ryan avoided them. He made coffee without looking at them. He reached around them for cereal. He left for work early and came home late, as if distance could shrink the truth. I watched him become a stranger in familiar clothes. By then, my suspicion had changed shape. At first, I thought Linda had poisoned him against me. I thought she had filled his head with doubts until he was too weak to defend his own wife. That hurt enough. But now I saw something worse. Ryan was not only afraid I might fail the test. He was afraid he might pass a different kind of test. I began noticing things I had ignored for years. Frank and Ryan did not look alike. Not in the normal way sons sometimes take after one parent more than another. Ryan had dark eyes, thick black hair, and a sharp jawline. Frank had pale blue eyes, soft reddish hair, and a round face that appeared in every old family photo. Linda always said Ryan looked like her side of the family. That explanation had worked because nobody questioned it. Nobody had a reason to, until I gave them one. 2 days later, Madison uploaded a short clip from the baby shower to her private family group. She did not include the whole scene. Only the part where Linda held the DNA test and I stood beside the cake, stunned and silent. By dinner, Ryan's cousins had seen it. By morning, my sister had heard about it. By noon, my phone was full of careful messages from people pretending not to ask what they were asking. Some sent support. Some wanted gossip. A few acted like my willingness to test the baby proved I had something to hide. That was when shame turned into anger. Not loud anger. Useful anger. I printed every message. I saved every video clip. I wrote down every date, every call, every time Ryan left the room to speak to his mother. I was not planning revenge. I was planning protection. For myself. For my son. For whatever was coming next. Frank came over that Friday while Ryan was still at work. He arrived without Linda, which already felt like an event. He stood on the porch in a faded Ohio State jacket, holding a small paper bag from the pharmacy. He looked older than he had at the baby shower. Not sick. Just hollowed out. Inside the bag was his own DNA kit. He placed it on the table and slid it toward me without ceremony. His face carried the shame of a man who had just realized his life might have been built on another person's silence. He did not accuse me. He did not defend Linda. He did not ask me to drop anything. That quiet dignity almost made me cry. Then he took an old photograph from his jacket pocket. It showed Linda in her 20s, standing beside a man I had never seen before. They were at a lake, sunburned and smiling too closely for old friends. The man had dark hair, dark eyes, and the same sharp jawline Ryan saw every morning in the mirror. Frank tapped the back of the photo once. There was a name written there. Daniel Mercer. The name meant nothing to me, but Frank's face told me it should. After he left, I searched the name. I expected nothing. Maybe an old coworker. Maybe a college boyfriend. Maybe some long-buried mistake Linda had forced everyone to forget. Instead, I found a real estate license. Then a wedding announcement. Then a photo from a local charity dinner in Cincinnati. Daniel Mercer was alive. He was wealthy. And standing beside him in the most recent photo was a woman I recognized from Ryan's office Christmas party. A woman Ryan had introduced as a client. My hands went cold on the keyboard. Because the secret was no longer 36 years old. It had followed my husband into our marriage. I stared at the photo until the screen blurred. The woman beside Daniel Mercer was not just someone from Ryan's office party. Her name was Claire Mercer. She was Daniel's daughter, a senior partner at the consulting firm where Ryan had started taking late meetings 3 months earlier. Ryan had introduced her as a client. That was the first lie I could prove. The second came faster. His old tablet was still synced to his work calendar. I had never checked it before because I did not want to be that kind of wife. That night, with my baby moving under my ribs and 3 DNA kits on the counter, I became exactly that kind of wife. And I stopped feeling guilty for it. There were meetings marked as financial reviews. Some were at the office. Others were at restaurants, parking garages, and one hotel near the airport. Claire's initials appeared on several entries, hidden inside project codes. Then I found one note that made my hands go numb. Mercer family verification. Not client verification. Family verification. I read it again and again, waiting for the words to become something else. They did not. The man from Frank's old photograph was not some distant mistake from Linda's past. He was connected to Ryan now. Recently. Quietly. Deliberately. Ryan had not been scared because his mother embarrassed me. He had been scared because I had almost exposed the part he already knew. By morning, I had barely slept. My back hurt. My ankles throbbed. My son kept pressing against my side like he was trying to remind me I still had one job left. Survive this without letting their secrets swallow us both. Ryan came home before lunch, which he never did. He noticed the tablet on the kitchen table. His face changed before he even saw the screen. That told me enough. Innocent people get confused first. Guilty people calculate. I did not ask questions. I watched him look from the tablet to the DNA kits, then to the hallway, as if he wanted to run but could not decide which door would save him. His silence filled in the blanks. Linda had known Daniel Mercer before she married Frank. Frank had suspected something years ago, but Linda had buried it under marriage, motherhood, and control. Ryan had grown up as Frank's son, carrying another man's face through family photos no one wanted to study too closely. Then Daniel reappeared. Not through Linda. Through Ryan's job. A wealthy man with one daughter, no sons, and a history Linda had never fully erased. Ryan had started meeting Claire first. Then Daniel. Then the late nights began. The money panic. The locked phone. The strange guilt every time I mentioned the baby. At first, I thought Ryan was cheating. Then I realized the truth was colder. He had been negotiating. Not for love. Not for forgiveness. For money. There was a draft email buried in the tablet cache. It mentioned inheritance discussions, private testing, and a possible trust arrangement if biological connection was confirmed. It also mentioned discretion, family sensitivity, and avoiding public exposure before Daniel's board review. That was the moment I actually whispered to myself that this was insane. Because my baby shower had not been an emotional attack that went too far. It had been damage control. Linda had brought that DNA test to make me the scandal. She wanted everyone looking at my pregnancy, my body, my marriage, my supposed betrayal. She needed Frank angry at me, not suspicious of her. She needed Ryan's panic to look like doubt about his wife, not fear about his own bloodline. And Ryan had let her do it. That was the part one could not forgive. Not yet. Maybe not ever. He had watched his pregnant wife stand alone in a room full of people because protecting himself mattered more than protecting me. He had let his mother turn our unborn child into a weapon because the truth about him was too expensive to face. Frank called later that afternoon. I did not answer at first. I stared at his name on my screen and felt the weight of what he was about to lose. A wife. A son, maybe. 36 years of certainty. When I finally listened to his voicemail, my chest tightened. He had already taken his test. He had mailed it himself. And he had sent another kit to Daniel Mercer. Frank's voicemail changed everything. Until then, I had been holding the truth like a private wound. I had proof of Ryan's lies, proof of Linda's panic, and enough pieces to understand the shape of the betrayal. But Frank had moved faster than any of us expected. He had mailed his DNA test. He had contacted Daniel Mercer. And suddenly, Linda no longer controlled the story. That night, Ryan came home looking ruined. His shirt was wrinkled, his eyes were red, and his phone kept buzzing inside his pocket. He did not answer it in front of me. He only stood in the kitchen, staring at the empty space where the DNA kits had been. I had already moved them. Not hidden. Protected. They were in my hospital bag, tucked beside newborn pajamas and my insurance papers. That felt strange and horrible. A bag meant for my son's first day alive now carried the evidence that might destroy his father's family. Ryan searched the counter, then the drawers, then the mail basket. I watched without helping. Something had broken in me after seeing that draft email. Not my love exactly. Love does not vanish in one clean moment. It drains out slowly, through every lie you finally understand. I still loved the man I thought I married. But that man had become harder to find. The real Ryan was standing in my kitchen, terrified of a test he had allowed his mother to force on me. He had let me become the villain because he needed time to secure his place in Daniel Mercer's world. A private trust. A possible inheritance. A new last name in all but paperwork. And I was carrying the baby he had nearly used as a distraction. The next morning, Linda arrived without warning. She did not knock like family. She rang the bell 3 times, sharp and fast, while I sat at the table with swollen feet and cold coffee. Through the window, I saw her polished car in the driveway and Madison in the passenger seat, holding her phone low against her lap. I did not open the door right away. For the first time, I let Linda wait. When I finally faced her, she looked nothing like the woman from the baby shower. Her hair was perfect, her lipstick neat, but her eyes were frantic. She tried to step inside like she still owned the room. I stayed in the doorway. Her voice stayed controlled, but her body betrayed her again. Her fingers kept twisting her wedding ring. Her gaze kept dropping to my belly. Not with tenderness. With calculation. She wanted the test stopped. She wanted the video deleted. She wanted Frank left alone. Most of all, she wanted Daniel Mercer kept out of it. Every request came dressed as concern for the baby, concern for stress, concern for family peace. But I could finally hear what lived underneath. She was not protecting a family. She was protecting the lie that gave her one. I did not argue. I did not explain. I only looked at Madison, who suddenly would not meet my eyes. That was when I understood she knew more than she had admitted. Maybe she had not known everything. But she had known enough to film me like evidence, not family. After Linda left, I called my doctor. Then I called an attorney. That was the first practical decision I made without asking Ryan. Not because I planned to destroy him, but because I needed to know where the ground was. If my marriage collapsed before my son was born, I needed documents, rights, accounts, and a plan. The attorney listened carefully. The advice was simple. Save everything. Move nothing secretly. Do not threaten. Do not sign. Do not let anyone pressure me about money, custody, or medical decisions before the birth. By evening, I opened a separate checking account. I moved my paycheck there. Not Ryan's money. Mine. It was the smallest act of self-protection, yet my hands shook the entire time. I had spent years thinking trust meant full access. Now I understood trust without boundaries was just an unlocked door. 3 days later, the first result arrived. It was not mine. It was not the baby's. It was Frank's. The email notification appeared while Ryan was upstairs and Linda was calling him again. I stared at the subject line until my vision blurred. My son kicked hard beneath my ribs, and I pressed one hand to my stomach. I opened the report. Then I understood why Linda had started begging before the envelope ever came. Frank was not Ryan's biological father. The report did not soften it. It did not care about birthdays, Christmas mornings, baseball games, hospital visits, or the faded family photos hanging in Linda's hallway. It reduced 36 years of fatherhood into a percentage so small it felt cruel. 0.0. I sat at the kitchen table with the laptop open, unable to move. My hands rested on my stomach. My son shifted under my palm, alive and innocent, while the adults around him kept turning blood into a weapon. Upstairs, Ryan's footsteps stopped. I had not made a sound, but somehow he knew. Maybe the whole house changed when the truth entered it. He came down slowly. I did not close the laptop. I did not hide the result. He stood behind my chair long enough to read the screen, and then his breathing changed. Not shock. Grief. That difference mattered. He had known there was a chance. He had known enough to be afraid. But seeing it written down still cut through him. His face crumpled in a way I had never seen before. For 1 second, I saw the boy inside the man. The boy who had trusted a father, feared a mother, and built his whole identity on a story someone else wrote for him. Then I remembered the baby shower. I remembered his silence. And I made myself stay still. Frank arrived before sunset. He looked smaller when he walked in. Not weak. Just emptied. Ryan could barely look at him. I expected anger, maybe shouting, maybe the kind of scene families remember for generations. Instead, the quiet became unbearable. Frank sat across from Ryan at the table where the test had once been placed beside the cake. He folded his hands and stared at the report. His wedding ring caught the light, and for some reason that detail hurt more than anything else. That ring had survived a lie longer than my marriage had survived honesty. Ryan looked like he wanted punishment. Frank looked like punishment had already happened. I sat between them with my swollen feet, aching back, and a terrible understanding growing inside me. Linda had not only betrayed Frank. She had trapped Ryan too. She had built his life on a secret, then trained him to protect her whenever truth got close. That did not excuse him. But it explained the strange fear in his body, the way he obeyed her without words, the way guilt followed him even before I knew why. The next result arrived 2 days later. Daniel Mercer was Ryan's biological father. This time, I did not open it alone. Frank was there. Ryan was there. My father was there too, standing near the doorway like a quiet wall between me and whatever came next. The report confirmed what Linda had spent decades hiding. The room did not break apart. It simply lost its last illusion. Ryan's face went blank. Frank closed his eyes. My father stared at the floor, not out of weakness, but because decent people sometimes look away when another man's life collapses. I felt no victory. That surprised me. I had imagined relief. I had imagined justice. I had imagined Linda finally losing the power she had used against me. But the truth did not feel clean. It felt like smoke after a house fire. Necessary, maybe, but still choking everyone inside. Then Ryan's phone lit up. A message from Claire Mercer appeared on the screen. I only saw part of it before he grabbed the phone, but it was enough. The wording was careful, corporate, and cold. Daniel wanted a private meeting. The trust discussion had changed. Public exposure had created complications. Money. Still money. Even after Frank's world shattered, even after Ryan learned the man who raised him was not his father, the Mercer family was already managing risk. That was when I finally understood Ryan's real mistake. He had not only hidden the truth. He had believed rich people would reward him for bleeding quietly. The following morning, Linda called me 14 times. I ignored every call. Then Madison texted me a file. No apology. No explanation. Just a video attachment. It was the full baby shower recording, not the edited clip. The full version showed Linda preparing herself before the announcement. It showed Ryan watching her. It showed Madison adjusting the camera before the DNA test ever appeared. And in the background, just before Linda stood up, Ryan's phone screen flashed with a message from Claire. The message was short. The baby shower had been planned to pressure me before the Mercer meeting. I watched the clip twice. Then I saved it in 3 places. Because now the lie was no longer just Linda's. It was a strategy. The video changed my fear into evidence. Until then, everything had felt tangled in emotion. Linda's cruelty. Ryan's silence. Frank's pain. Daniel Mercer's money. Claire's careful messages. But the full recording made one thing clear. They had not lost control at the baby shower. They had started there. The test was meant to corner me while I was pregnant, exhausted, and surrounded by people who hated conflict. Linda wanted me humiliated before I could think. Ryan wanted the pressure off him before the Mercer family meeting. Claire wanted the family scandal aimed at my stomach instead of Daniel's past. And Madison had filmed it like a trap being set. I sent the video to my attorney that morning. Then I sent it to my father. Not because I wanted a war, but because I needed witnesses. For years, I had mistaken peace for safety. I had stayed quiet when Linda made small cuts. I had smiled when Ryan failed to protect me. I had allowed people to treat my patience like permission. That ended before my son was born. Ryan tried to act broken enough to be forgiven. He moved softly through the house, made me tea, folded baby clothes, and slept on the couch without being asked. He looked destroyed, and part of me believed he truly was. Learning the truth about Frank had cracked something deep inside him. But grief did not erase strategy. He still took calls outside. He still deleted messages. He still froze whenever Daniel Mercer's name appeared. That was the part one could not ignore. A man can be hurt and dangerous at the same time. That was the lesson I learned in those final days before labor. Ryan was not a monster. He was scared, ashamed, and desperate to matter to a wealthy father who had never raised him. But desperation makes people selfish. And selfish people can ruin you while crying. Frank filed for separation from Linda 2 days after Daniel's result came in. He did it quietly, through an attorney, without a public scene. Linda's perfect house suddenly had boxes in the hallway and neighbors pretending not to stare. For the first time, she stopped posting family photos. That silence said more than any apology would have. Then Daniel Mercer's attorney contacted Ryan. The meeting happened in a downtown office with glass walls and expensive coffee. I was not there, but I saw the aftermath on Ryan's face. Whatever fantasy he had built about Daniel welcoming him, it died in that room. Daniel did not want a son. He wanted discretion. The trust was no longer guaranteed. The inheritance talk vanished. The only offer left was a confidentiality agreement with a number attached. A generous number, but still smaller than Ryan's hope and colder than any father's embrace. Ryan came home with a folder in his hand. He looked at me like I was supposed to understand why silence suddenly had a price. I did understand. That was why I refused to sign anything connected to the Mercer family. My name would not protect Daniel. My baby's name would not protect Daniel. And my pain would not become paperwork for rich people. That refusal turned Ryan's sadness into panic. Not rage. Not yet. Something worse. A quiet, urgent fear that made him pace the hallway, check the blinds, and whisper into his phone when he thought I was asleep. By then, I had already packed a second bag. Not the hospital bag. The leaving bag. It stayed in my car under a blanket, beside copies of financial records, printed messages, the baby shower video, and every test result. My mother knew. My father knew. My attorney knew. Ryan did not. 3 nights later, the doorbell rang just after 2 in the morning. I woke before Ryan did. The baby pressed low against my spine, and for a second, I thought labor had started. Then the bell rang again, followed by a soft knocking that sounded more desperate than angry. When I checked the camera, Linda stood on the porch. No cream suit. No pearls. No perfect lipstick. Just a gray sweater, bare face and hands trembling around a large envelope. Ryan came down behind me, suddenly wide awake. He saw his mother on the screen and went completely still. I opened the door only because my father was already on speaker in my pocket, listening. Linda looked smaller than I had ever seen her. Her eyes were swollen. Her wedding ring was gone. The envelope in her hand was bent at the corners, gripped too tightly for too long. It was addressed to me. Not Ryan. Not Frank. Me. She had come to stop me before I saw what was inside. And when I took the envelope from her shaking hands, Ryan stepped back like he already knew this secret was worse than the first one. The envelope felt heavier than paper should. I carried it to the kitchen while Ryan remained near the hallway. Linda stayed by the door, looking past me and toward him, but I no longer cared what silent messages passed between them. Their silence had already done enough damage. My father's voice stayed on speaker in my pocket. That was the only reason I kept my hands steady. Inside the envelope were printed emails, old photographs, and one notarized letter from Linda. The letter was not an apology. It was a confession arranged like a legal shield. She had written it because Frank's attorney had cornered her, Daniel's attorney had threatened her, and Ryan had become useful to no one. The first page confirmed what we already knew. Daniel Mercer was Ryan's biological father. Linda had known since before Ryan was born. Frank had been allowed to raise another man's child because Linda needed stability, a house, and a husband who would not ask too many questions. But the second page made Ryan sink into a chair. Years earlier, Linda had contacted Daniel for money. Not once. Repeatedly. She had sent photos of Ryan as a teenager, then graduation pictures, then wedding pictures. Daniel had paid her quietly to keep the past buried. Ryan had not discovered Daniel by accident. Daniel had discovered Ryan first. And Claire Mercer had not entered Ryan's life as a client. She had been sent to evaluate him. Every late meeting, every private dinner, every carefully hidden email had been part of Daniel's decision. Not about fatherhood. About risk. About whether Ryan was desperate, controllable, and quiet enough to be handled with money. Ryan had thought he was walking toward inheritance. He was walking into a file. That was what destroyed him. Not the DNA result. Not Linda's lie. The realization that the father he had dreamed about had studied him like a problem. I watched his face change as he reached the last pages. His shame turned hollow. Then small. Then almost childlike. He had betrayed Frank for Daniel. He had abandoned me in that living room for Daniel. He had let his unborn son become a shield for Daniel. And Daniel had never wanted him. He had only wanted him contained. Linda finally broke down near the door, but her tears no longer moved me. I had spent too many years mistaking her pain for death. Some people cry because they are sorry. Others cry because control is leaving the room. That night, I did not let either of them stay. My father came over before sunrise. My mother arrived with clean laundry, soup, and the quiet fury of a woman who had watched her daughter swallow humiliation for too long. By morning, I was gone from that house. I went to my parents' place in Cleveland. 2 days later, my contractions started. My son was born on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, red-faced, furious, and perfect. When the nurse placed him on my chest, the whole Mercer name, the Carter name, the lies, the tests, and the money fell away for one breath. He was not evidence. He was not a scandal. He was my son. The final test confirmed what I already knew. Ryan was his biological father. But biology no longer felt like the thing that made a family. Frank proved that. Ryan proved the opposite. In the months after, Frank became the person who showed up most consistently. He brought diapers without being asked. He fixed a loose shelf in the nursery. He held my son with gentle hands and never once acted like love needed matching blood to count. Ryan tried to rebuild what he had broken. Sometimes he seemed honest. Sometimes he seemed lost. But I had learned not to confuse regret with change. I filed for separation, kept every document, and built a life with locked doors, clear boundaries, and my own bank account. Linda moved out of Frank's house before the divorce papers were finished. Daniel Mercer never appeared in my doorway. Claire vanished from Ryan's company records within weeks. And Madison deleted the baby shower video from the family group, not knowing I had saved it in 3 places. I still have the envelope. Not because I want revenge. Because some truths need witnesses. When my son is older, I will not teach him to hate the people who hurt me. I will teach him something simpler. Love without courage is not protection. Silence is not peace. And anyone who demands a test from you should be ready for their own truth to come out too.